Hi everyone, my name is Meghan Laverty and I'm an undergraduate student in the Bachelor of Health Sciences program here at the University of Ottawa. And for my fourth year honors project, I'm doing research with Dr. Dianandan, who's presenting this afternoon. And the title of my project is Academic Librarians' Attitudes Towards Beall's List of Predatory Journals, and that's what I'm going to be talking about today. So with the increase in open access publishing and the success of the open access model, we've seen an explosion of these so-called predatory journals, which are journals that exploit the author pays or the gold open access model for their own profit, so to make money. They engage in deceptive practices and they don't provide the editorial and the peer review services that they say that they're going to. They also serve to propagate weak or unsubstantiated evidence, which pollutes the literature. They can undermine public trust in the validity of scientific publication. They can also damage the reputation of an author's work if they unknowingly publish in one of these journals. And it can also create negativity or fear around open access journals from people that aren't able to differentiate between predatory journals and good quality journals. So we need a reliable way to identify these, not only for authors who are looking to publish their work, but also for tenure and promotion committees and hiring committees who are looking at someone's CV and trying to tell if their research is good quality or not. And this can be more difficult than it sounds, particularly for new and experienced authors who aren't used to navigating the publishing landscape. At the moment, there isn't a single agreed upon criteria for how to identify a journal as predatory, and this is in part because they're always changing and becoming more sophisticated at passing themselves off as a legitimate journal. So what is Beall's List? So Beall's List is a blacklist of potential, probable, or probably predatory open access publishers and journals. It's compiled by a librarian at the University of Colorado called Jeffrey Beall, and it's posted on his blog, which is called scholarlyoa.com, and it's become known as quote-unquote Beall's List. And he was the one who actually coined the term predatory journals, and he's become kind of the self-appointed expert in the field. And the list has become really popular, and for a lot of people it's become a go-to tool for identifying predatory journals, not only by individuals but also by institutions. When it was last released, it contained over 1,000 publishers and almost 1,300 standalone journals. And some examples, or the most controversial examples, include Omics, because they threatened to sue him, I guess, and Frontiers, which was added recently, and a lot of people didn't agree with that, so it was a little bit controversial there. So the list is controversial in other ways as well. Not everyone agrees with the criteria that he uses to identify journals as predatory. A lot of people describe it as too general and also too subjective, which allows him to call journals predatory when maybe they are not. It's also inconsistently applied, so his criteria is applied to open access journals only. He doesn't apply it to traditional publishing models. It's not evidence-based, and there's also a lack of transparency, so he doesn't describe why he adds a certain journal or publisher to his list or why he removes it. So readers are essentially left in the dark about why an individual journal is added. Some have also noted that he's overly critical towards publishers from less economically developed countries. And he's also highly critical of the open access publishing movement in general. He's a strong advocate for traditional publishing models, so some people question his ability to make unbiased judgments. And on January 15th of this year, the website was actually taken down with no warning. If you searched and looked for his website, it just said that the service is no longer available. And the University of Colorado just released a statement that he took down the list as a personal decision, so wasn't any official statement saying exactly why he took it down. So what we wanted to know from our research study is, to what extent do professional librarians agree with Beall's List and see it as a useful and valid tool for determining the quality of open access journals? So in early December, so before the list was taken down, we sent out a survey to librarians who had their emails listed on Canadian university websites. We sent them to about 1,000 email addresses, and we received 253 responses, which is pretty impressive. We had a quantitative portion which asked for things like years of experience, discipline, and some questions where they had to rate something on a scale of 1 to 5. And then we had a qualitative portion which had written responses to allow for more detail, and that's the part of the survey that I'm going to be presenting to everyone today. So one of the main things that I noticed right away when reading the responses was that the opinions were strongly polarized. So there were people who had nothing but positive things to say about Beall's list and other people that had nothing but negative things to say. So for example, someone wrote, "There's nothing else comparable. It's accessible and comprehensive. I applaud his work and dedication in this area." And then another person wrote, "Beall's list should be rejected across the board." I have another example of a negative quote, someone that wrote, "I have to be honest, I've never used or looked at Beall's list. I have concerns about him based on how he conducts himself online that gives me pause. I don't think I will ever look at or recommend his list as a means of avoiding predatory journals. The idea is totally repellent to me." So obviously there are some pretty extreme point of views. I would say the most common point of view appeared to be that Beall's list is useful, but only as a starting point, and it should be used with caution because it could be biased or incorrect. So someone wrote, "I am sincerely grateful to have Beall's list as a resource because I don't have time to keep track of potentially problematic journals myself. I just wish others would use the list more judiciously and less credulously." So two of the other questions that we asked were, what are some of the positive and what are some of the negative aspects of Beall's list? So the most common responses for the positive aspects were that it's quick, easy, accessible, and convenient. It's useful as a starting point. It's helped raise awareness about predatory publishing, and it's also that it's helpful for new researchers and authors who maybe don't know much about predatory publishing and they don't really know where to start. Many of the librarians said that they recommend it as a tool for new researchers, so when they're working with grad students and that type of thing. The negative aspects included that it's based on one person's opinion and therefore subject to biases. Many people brought up Beall's criticism of open access publishing in general as a reason to question the impartiality of his judgments. For example, one of the answers was, "The list is colored by Beall's political views. It may be a method by which he can discredit the open access movement." Others argued that the judgment is too harsh and that journals can be incorrectly listed as predatory. So one of the respondents wrote, "I have run into publishers listed on Beall that I consider to be legitimate publishers. He's far too eager to add publishers and journals to his list." Others mentioned, like I talked about earlier, that it could be biased, his criteria is biased against non-Western publications. So one of the responses was, "In a lot of cases, I find Beall's list to be very ethnocentric. It beats up on journals hosted in low-income countries and that are run by people who may not have the means to meet all of our Western expectations around scholarly publishing practices." Another negative that was frequently mentioned was that the list includes open access journals only, and that can have negative effects on the open access movement. So one of the librarians wrote that Beall focuses on open access journals such that predatory OA journals is the phrase many academics use, without similarly acknowledging the predatory nature of non-OA journals. And another response was, "When looked at simplistically, the list can end up giving OA a bad name. People see the list, particularly through the media, hear about the problems, and assume OA is no good." Others mentioned a lack of transparency or information about why each journal had been listed. For example, "I don't believe you can see the reasoning as to why a journal was put on the list. It would be useful to see how and why Beall came to a conclusion re a specific publisher." And the final answer that was written a lot was that it encourages over-reliance on the blacklist rather than people employing critical thinking skills to discern for themselves which journals are predatory, which is problematic as the list can be inaccurate or incomplete. So one of the responses was, "Faculty members may tend to accept his list as the definitive evaluation of a journal's quality without learning and applying their own critical appraisal processes. So the list can become a dangerous shorthand for where not to publish." So another question that we asked, we wanted to know the answer to, was what role should Beall's list play in determining the quality of a scholar's research and publication record? So about half of the respondents said no role or a minimal role. They felt that a scholar's publications should be evaluated based on their own merit. So one of the responses was, "I think that an author's research should be evaluated on its own regardless of where it has been published. If the research itself is great, then it shouldn't matter all that much where it is published." A quarter said that it should be used as a tool, but alone should not define a scholar's record. So this person wrote, "Beall's list is just one of several quality checking options that should be on the radar for both article authors and those evaluating research and publications." And the last quarter said either that it's could raise a red flag if a lot of an author's publications are on Beall's list. And then a few people also said that if an article is published in one of the journals listed on Beall's, that it should be disregarded. So some of the takeaways that I got from the survey was that I got a sense that predatory publishing is an issue that a lot of librarians are concerned about, not only because of the number of responses that we got in the survey, but also because of the answers that they gave and the concerns that they expressed in their responses. Also, in contrast to Beall's position on open access, the group that answered our survey were very positive about open access publishing. Many of the criticisms that they brought forward about Beall's list were related to his stance on open access publishing and the negative press that his list has caused it to receive. Very few librarians accepted the list at face value. The vast majority recognize that it has possible flaws and should not be relied on as an absolute. And few saw Beall's list as the solution to predatory publishing. What I found instead was that they wanted one of the following 4 things. So many felt that the way to identify predatory journals is not through a blacklist, but through spreading awareness and promoting critical thinking skills among authors. So one response was, predatory journal websites are cheap to run and easy to make. If they trick just a few researchers, they stand to make thousands of dollars. But they cease to be a threat when people have the skills to recognize the red flags. We need to be focused so much more on giving people the tools, the internet street smarts, necessary to not be fooled by fake publishers. Others called for reform to the quote-unquote bean counter or publish or perish attitudes in academia. So my example quote is, I think that predatory publishing is part of the bigger problem of scientific fraud that has always existed and is now exacerbated by the frenzied speed at which the researchers must perform and publish in order to establish and advance their careers. Some mentioned that they would prefer a whitelist of good quality open access journals, like the DOAJ. So one of the answers was, I prefer the approach taken by DOAJ, a team of scholars working together to include good journals, using transparent practices, including communication with publishers. And then others mentioned that they would like a blacklist, but by a larger, more transparent organization. So one of the responses was, Beall's list is but one resource to promote awareness, but one still needs to do further research before making decisions. It would be nice if a larger body took this on, gave it some legitimacy, and then could promote its use and increase the reputation.